Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this in the world. I hope you guys are doing okay. So today we're going to be covering a very brief topic, but I did think it was a very interesting one, and it's one that came from Harada, and it is regarding the newer players to Tekken. So I'll read out to you the important parts of what he said, and then we'll break it down. What I will say is that if you are easily offended, maybe this video is not for you. As you guys know, I don't really mince my words. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think about what Harada has said, whether I agree or disagree. You've been given your warning, but if you stick around, please let me know what you think in the comment section below. I do think it will be a very interesting conversation. And pass this on to your friends that maybe play other genres and ask them what they think about what I'm saying and if they agree or disagree. So the article says, when asked for his opinion on the subject, Harada claimed there might be more emphasis on team-orientated play, as he believes younger players today are rarely eager to play one-on-one competitive games because they prefer team-based shooters where they can blame their lousy team for losing a match. Now, I know some of you that play shooting games are probably looking at the screen going, what the hell did he just say? Well, allow me to finish, there isn't much more. It seems to me that the way fighting games are played has evolved over time with the generations, Harada said. In Japan and probably in most of the world, my generation is a big one. It makes up a good chunk of the population that made our society a competitive one. If you applied to a school or for a job, there was always a lot of competition. Because of this, people in my generation prefer definitive outcomes, a clear winner and loser. This applies to folks in and around their 50s. But most young people nowadays are the opposite. They're rarely eager to engage in one-on-one showdowns. Plus, because fighting games pit you by yourself against a single opponent, you have to accept all the responsibility if you lose. You can't blame anyone else. Now, I know this is going to be a very contentious subject. I want to chime in on it and give my 2 cents. I am not in Harada's age bracket. I am 31, about to turn 32, so Harada is quite a bit older than me, and I'm not going to make out like millennials don't fall into the bracket that he's referring to. I do actually believe there's quite a lot of validity to what he's saying, and I think there's quite a bit of proof that you can show regarding this, and it's something that we can probably discuss. So I'll tell you what I think about it. You guys let me know what you think. Now, I think he's correct in saying that gamers of today are definitely softer than gamers that came before them. I grew up in the arcade scene, and so that's not the earliest version of a gamer, of course, but it's a pretty early one in terms of competitive fighting games. And obviously in the arcade, there was no way that you could plug. Now, for those of you who are new here, plugging is when you're playing a match online and somebody pulls the plug out because they can't take losing, they don't want to deal with a particular character, or they're just not happy with the outcome that they're facing. In the arcade, you did not have that choice. And one thing that made it so that you had to become good at the games was that you had to spend money every single day to play the game. And if you wanted to stay on and save your money, you had to be good. So when I would go to Trocadero Arcade in London, when I would go to Good Street, when I would go to any of these arcades, you take some money with you, take some coins, and the goal is to remain on the arcade cabinet for as long as possible. This forces you to become good at the games. It forces you to deal with losing, take it on the chin if you want to keep playing, or just go home and don't come back. And there was no point in walking away from a fight because you already put your coin in the machine, so you may as well fight. With the advent of online gaming, it's very easy for you to just step away from a fight. And this is partly why we see a lot of one and dones. Now, I'm going to bring up one and dones in a little bit. But the arcade scene did definitely breed a bunch of gamers, or a bunch of fighting gamers, with relation to this, that I would say were a bit more thick-skinned. I think in this day and age that it's very easy to start a game and lose to a particular character and think, I am not dealing with this. Now, I want you guys to stick with me because I'm not talking about this from an elitist standpoint. I'm not trying to make out like I'm better than you. This is just the facts of the matter. Tekken 8 is a very, very good example of this. Tekken 8 has some very overpowered characters right now. I would know, I play one of them, and there's characters like Dragunov, there's characters like Jun, there's characters like Devil Jin who are very, very oppressive and very hard to deal with. But Tekken 8 is not the first game to come out with very powerful characters. We saw this with Second Impact, we have seen this with Street Fighter 2, we have seen this with other Tekken games like Tekken 6, we've seen it in other 3D games like Dead or Alive, we've seen it all across the board in multiple different styles of games, even down to arena fighters. Now, back in the day, we also had really, really bad internet. So to even get a game on some of these games that adopted online very early, you weren't leaving that game because finding one was very difficult. And so you would train and you would train and you would train. At least in my experience, that's how I experienced a lot of games back then. You would train as hard as you could and you'd get that game and you'd stay locked in with that person for as long as you can, win, lose or draw. These days, it's very easy to find games on fighting games, and it's very easy to walk away from them. Tekken doesn't really penalize players to the extent that we would like them to. They've started doing it now, but it's still not good enough, and this is something that happens across the board. I think one of the biggest things with fighting games with regards to people plugging is that we do have a lot of new players, and that a lot of these new players are not used to being absolutely destroyed in an online game and not having anyone else to turn to. I can give you an example with Helldivers. Sometimes I'm playing Helldivers and I'm not doing my best, but I have a team around me and sometimes they carry me through. Now I happen to be good at Helldivers, so most of the time I don't need carrying, but one game I am terrible at and one game I'll never be good at is Rainbow Six. Now I have won loads of games on Rainbow Six, loads of games, because I happen to have friends that are very, very good at it. So if you go and look at my record on Rainbow Six, it might show that I've won more games than I've lost, but in actuality I am dog shit at that game. Now if you translate that over to a fighting game like Tekken or Street Fighter, if you translate my skill over, I will lose every game because there's nobody there to carry me. And so we've seen a massive influx of new people come over to Tekken, and I encouraged new people to come over to Tekken. I encouraged them from Mortal Kombat, but I also did warn people, Tekken is a very brutal game, it's very rough, especially in the early stages when you're learning the game. You need to be ready to lose consistently. Even with all the years that I've put into the game, sometimes I still lose consistently and I'll lose loads and loads of points. It's one of those things you just have to take on the chin. I definitely think that people that come from shooting games, for example, are going to have a very hard time with fighting games. A, because fighting games are significantly harder to play, in my opinion anyway. I do think that shooting games are a bit more pick up and play. That's not to say that at a high level with some shooting games that they don't go to the next level. I've definitely seen people playing Overwatch and Counter-Strike at an amazing level, but there is a lot to consider when you come over to a game like Tekken. You have one character with 100 moves and then a bunch of systems to learn against multiple characters with 100 moves and multiple systems to learn. With a game like Call of Duty, for example, you pick it up, you shoot the gun. And with a game like Overwatch, you pick your style of character, whether that's a healer or DPS, and then you build a team around that. So not everybody is going to play DPS, not everybody is going to play healer. You rely on your teammates to make sure they are doing their part. That does not exist in a fighting game. Now again, that's not me putting down Call of Duty players. I'm not saying you can't get better at it. Far be it from me to make out like I can go and compete on the world stage at Call of Duty, but I can't go and compete on the world stage at most games. What I'm trying to convey to you is that in my experience of playing loads of different games, fighting games are the ones where A, you have to be accountable, and of course you can be accountable for your teammates in Overwatch, for example, but they are also accountable for you. In a fighting game, nobody is there watching out for you. It's you, yourself, your character, and your skill. And B, they have more things for you to learn on the ground, and there's a lot more nuances as you go up in the ranks. That's just in my personal experience. I think the plugging is very telling of that. I think people being unable to deal with their losses is very telling. Now, I'm not saying that older people don't plug. Obviously, we know there are some notorious pluggers in the FGC. We don't need to name names, but we all know who they are. We know there are some notorious cheaters in the FGC. We've seen it on the Tekken leaderboards. We've seen it in Street Fighter. We all know who they are. And I'm not saying that there's not older people that plug, but I have never seen plugging like I have in Tekken 8. And I think that's because Tekken 8 had a massive boom when it came out. That is also the same for Mortal Kombat 1. I have been quitality'd in Mortal Kombat 1 more than my entire time playing MK11, and I only played Mortal Kombat 1 for about a month. I do think there's been a massive influx of players, and I do think that they have a very, very hard time of accepting the fact that they need to go and train and lab matchups and learn characters and then come back. I think in a shooting game, your hand gets held, and that's why I think you're seeing an explosion of plugging like we have never seen before. That, and obviously Tekken doesn't help by not penalizing them properly, but this was definitely not something that was happening before. Fighting games are experiencing a resurgence, and with that resurgence you get a lot of new players, and it's very easy to see why somebody would want to plug. I don't condone it. I think it's silly. I don't know why you'd bother playing a game if you're not going to be willing to take L's, but it's very clear to see why people plug. Another reason is that with the more recent generations, there's something called a participation trophy. Now, I never had participation trophies when I was in school. There was winners and there were losers, and that was it. And they have pushed this participation trophy idea on children for a very long time now, where everybody's a winner. Even if you participated but you didn't come first place, it's okay, here's your medal. And I think if you continue to do that with children, forget in games, just in life in general, you don't teach them how to lose. And so when they come up with a situation where they really do need to deal with something where they need to learn consistently before they get it right, they don't know how to deal with it. When I was in school, it was winners or losers, and you had to get better at that particular thing. You were forced to. No one patted you on the back for coming last place. These days, last place does not exist. Now, you're probably asking, well, what is the point in participation trophies then if they're going to effectively make people be ill-equipped to deal with losing? Well, one of the ideas is that it boosts self-esteem. The idea is that even though you're not good at the game, even though you're not good at that particular sport, even though you might be lacking in a particular area of your life, it's okay because you still tried. Now, there's some truth to that it's okay because you did try, but it's not good enough. It's great that you tried, but it's not good enough. The messaging, unfortunately, to these kids is that congratulations for even being here. There's no mention of losing. The other idea is that it encourages continued participation. Now, Tekken is a perfect example of this. The player base is starting to drop off very slowly. I think one of the reasons that it's dropping off is, of course, there are problems with Tekken right now, and the regular player base has had enough of some of the issues. But I think that because they go into games on their own, and they are forced to deal with the situation on their own without anyone to back them up, much like they might have in Rainbow Six, for example, they no longer want to play because it requires you to put in the work on your own and learn on your own. And so continued participation goes out the window for these people because there's nobody there holding them up. Like I said in Helldivers, if I'm having a bad game but I've got 2 good teammates, they can carry us through and we can get extracted. If I'm having a bad day on Tekken, it is going to show immediately because my points are going to get absolutely swamped. The other idea is that it fosters a positive learning environment, and that is with regards to school. So if you feel like you are always last place, the participation trophy idea makes it so that you're not left out, so that you don't see the other kids in arm's reach, that you can't reach out to them. The idea is that children are not ready to face the harsh realities of the real world, but in actuality, teaching children at a young age to deal with losing will be great when they go into their adulthood. They'll be more equipped to know what they need to do to go on to become winners. I think the participation trophy idea ultimately ends up coddling people and doesn't teach them about real world consequences. That's my opinion. Essentially making a generation much softer. Now, I know that might not sit well with some people, but like I said, I also think this applies to my generation. Whilst the participation trophy was not in my school, I'm sure it was probably in other schools, and I think it's definitely something that millennials have been more willing to adopt rather than the older generation, the generation that came before us. But I think the younger generations have definitely experienced it a lot more. Again, one of the examples you can really use from this is one and dones. A lot of people are just not willing to deal with somebody that is stronger than them. I always found the mentality weird, and I never really understood when I saw the comments in my comment section of people saying to me, why would I deal with this? The reason that there was a disconnect, I think, is because my mentality and my upbringing was very different. Now, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. Please try to understand I'm just trying to explore different trains of thoughts and why people do these things. I'm not trying to put anyone down. But when you say things like, I'm not willing to play this person again because what's the point in me losing? This person is too good for me. This person is just going to take my points. It does come from that mentality of what is the point? And I do think there's 2 different mentalities here when it comes to fighting games. A, because there are a lot of new players, and B, because there are different upbringings. Now, I'm not trying to say that I am harder than you.
Pause.
I'm not trying to say that I'm better than you. I'm not trying to say that you are soft and you're pathetic and weak. So don't take it that way. I'm more trying to understand, A, why people do this, although I think I have an understanding on why people do this. Soft is not the word that I want to use because I'd rather have a more intelligent conversation with you guys rather than just putting people down. I've seen other people saying things like brittle, weak, no backbone, and I don't think any of these talking points really help progress the conversation. And I'll be honest with you guys, I've really struggled to understand why when people get into a fight with somebody that's much better than them, why they don't just stick around to learn something from them. And again, a lot of the comments that I've read is that what's the point? And that just does not resonate with me. So I'd like to have that conversation with you guys. You know that I try to respond to as many comments as possible, but I do find Harada's comments very interesting. Now, the reason that he was talking about this is that he's thinking to himself that Tekken might be too hard for new players, and they're thinking of pivoting into new modes that accommodate team-based play. In team-based play, you can alleviate some of the pressure of losing to your teammates. You can blame people when things go wrong, or you can be carried to victory, much like I said I have been carried on Rainbow Six multiple times, and sometimes when I'm having a bad day on Helldivers. But that's rare, because your boy is pretty sick at Helldivers. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you think millennials and the generations that have come after them are pretty soft? Do you think that the participation trophies are a bad idea and they contribute to people not wanting to deal with loss? And do you think that maybe this is the reason why you one and done or you plug? Again, don't take this video as a way of me putting you down. Trust me, if I wanted to put people down, I wouldn't mince my words, but I can definitely see how it would be taken that way. I'd like to hear from you guys. Let me know, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Take care and peace.